The mat creaked once, and then the room went silent. Nobody in the gymnasium had ever seen Mara Voss lose a match by submission, and nobody expected the slim, unassuming man across from her to be the one who finally did it. When it happened, 11 minutes later, only the 4 people closest to the cage believed their own eyes. Port Hallow, Pacific Northwest. Late October. Rain-soaked evening. The old fishing supply warehouse on the edge of town had been converted into a gym 15 years earlier, but it had never lost the smell of brine and motor oil that clung to its rafters. Outside, the rain came down in sheets against the corrugated roof, drumming a steady rhythm that mixed with the squeak of mats and the low murmur of the 20 or so people gathered along the walls. Someone had propped the loading bay door open an inch, just enough to let the cold air cut through the heat of the room. This was not a sanctioned event. There were no judges, no sponsors, no cameras rolling for broadcast. It was the kind of night that existed only in word of mouth, the kind people would later argue about, because so few had actually been there to see it. Mara Voss stood in the center of the mat, arms loose at her sides, the overhead lights catching the sheen of sweat already on her shoulders, even though the match hadn't started. At 6'1" and 280 pounds, Mara had built her career on being undeniable. 12 years in competitive strongwoman and amateur grappling circuits. 2 regional titles in deadlift. A win streak in submission wrestling that had reached 19 before tonight. 11 of those by forfeit, because no one in her weight class wanted to step on the mat with her. She had hands that could crush a walnut without a tool, a grip strength that had once bent a steel carabiner during a charity stunt, and a wingspan that made smaller opponents look like children standing next to her. People who watched her warm up sometimes laughed, not out of disrespect, but disbelief. The way you laugh at whether that shouldn't be possible. Across the mat from her stood Bruce Lee. 5'6", 141 pounds on a good day, soaking wet. He wore a plain gray t-shirt, frayed at the collar, and sweatpants that had clearly been through more wash cycles than fight gear should ever see. No logos, no team. He'd shown up to the warehouse alone, on a bicycle, carrying nothing but a water bottle and a rolled-up GI he never even put on. He bowed to the room before anyone introduced him. Most people didn't bow back. A few snickered. His art didn't have a flashy name. He called it, when pressed, simply the old method. A hybrid discipline passed down through 3 generations of his family, built less around strength and more around displacement, redirecting force rather than meeting it, finding the half-second where an opponent's weight betrayed them. He had trained fishermen's sons and dockworkers' daughters in a converted boathouse for 11 years, charging almost nothing, asking only that students show up sober and on time. Nobody outside that boathouse had ever seen him fight someone his own size, let alone someone twice it. What people didn't know, what even Theo only half understood, was that Bruce Lee had spent the better part of 2 decades preparing for moments like this one, even if he'd never expected one to arrive in a converted fishing warehouse on a Tuesday night. His grandfather, who had taught him the foundations of the method on the deck of a trawler before Bruce Lee was tall enough to see over the gunnel, had drilled one lesson above every other. The bigger they are, the more honest their weight becomes. Big, strength-built fighters rarely learn to disguise their intentions, his grandfather used to say, because they had never needed to. Their power did the convincing for them. It was smaller, faster opponents who taught you nothing about commitment or follow-through. They could change direction too easily, hide their way too well. It was the heavy hitters, the ones who trusted their own force completely, who handed you the clearest map of where they were going next. So Bruce Lee had spent years sparring with the largest people he could find, dockworkers, movers, a retired sumo wrestler who ran a noodle stand 2 towns over, not because he wanted to prove anything, but because they were, paradoxically, the easiest teachers. He did not see Mara Voss as dangerous because of her size. He saw her as dangerous because she had built a career on never once being forced to ask a different question. The challenge had not come from Bruce Lee. It came from Mara, 3 weeks earlier, after watching a grainy video someone had filmed of him sparring with 4 students at once, calmly, almost lazily, redirecting each attacker into the next without ever seeming to plant his feet. "That's a trick," she'd said, loud enough for the bar to hear. "Works on amateurs. Wouldn't work on someone who actually hits." The video reached Bruce Lee 2 days later. He watched it once in silence, then asked only one question of the friend who'd shown him. Is she training or performing? When the answer came back, training hard, every day, real records, real strength, Bruce Lee nodded slowly. Then it would be disrespectful to refuse her. He sent no trash talk back. No statement, no rebuttal. Just a single line relayed through a mutual acquaintance. Tell her I'll be there. Word spread the way it does in small coastal towns, fast, and through people who swore they weren't telling anyone. By the night of the match, the warehouse held far more bodies than it should have, fire code be damned. But when the moment actually came, when Mara Voss and Bruce Lee stepped onto the mat and the crowd pressed back to clear the space, only 4 people stood close enough to see what happened next without the rain, the shadows, or someone's shoulder getting in the way. There was Sully, who owned the warehouse and had reluctantly agreed to host the match, on the condition that nobody sued him. There was Theo, Bruce Lee's longest-standing student, who had begged to be allowed to watch from the corner, silent the entire time. There was AJ, a journalist for the regional paper, who'd come expecting a human interest puff piece and left without writing a single word about it for 6 months, because she didn't trust herself to describe it accurately yet. And there was Mara's own training partner, Denny, arms crossed, jaw tight, certain. His friend was about to embarrass a man half her size in under 30 seconds. You sure about this? Denny asked her, quietly, as she rolled her neck. He's fast, Mara said. I've seen the footage. But fast doesn't matter once I've got a hand on you. She held up one palm, fingers spread, and closed it slowly into a fist. Nothing's gotten out of this hand in 3 years. Bruce Lee, a few feet away, was tightening the drawstring on his sweatpants and saying nothing at all. The match began the way most expected, with Mara closing distance immediately, refusing to let the smaller man use space or angles. She moved with the deceptive quickness some big women have, the kind people underestimate right up until the moment a 280-pound body is suddenly 6 inches from your face. Bruce Lee didn't retreat. He didn't circle away either. He stepped in, slightly off her centerline, and let her right hand close around his left wrist exactly the way she wanted it to. That was the part nobody in the crowd understood until much later, when Theo tried to explain it to people who hadn't been there. Bruce Lee wasn't trying to avoid being grabbed. He was trying to get grabbed on his terms, in a spot where her grip strength, fearsome against an object that resisted, had almost nothing to work with against a wrist that was already moving toward her, not away. Her hand clamped down. Mara felt the satisfaction of contact, the old familiar certainty of I have you now. Half a second later, she didn't understand why she was off balance. Bruce Lee hadn't pulled away from the grip. He'd rotated into it, dropping his elbow and stepping through the space her own forward momentum had opened up, using the very tension in her grip as the axle for his turn. It wasn't a throw in the way most of the room understood throws, no spectacular launch, no crowd gasp from across the room. It was small, a redirection of maybe 8 inches. But 8 inches was enough to put her weight on her toes instead of her heels, just for an instant. And an instant was all the old method needed. Mara recovered fast. She always did. She planted, reset, and tried to close again, this time lower, tried to get under his center and simply pick him up. The strongman's answer to a problem strongman strength was built to solve. She got her arms around him. The crowd actually cheered, sensing the fight returning to a shape they recognized. Big against small, weight against speed. The familiar story. For one terrible second, Denny thought she had him. Then Bruce Lee's hips dropped a fraction. His weight seemed to simply disappear from where her arms expected it to be, and his free hand found the inside of her elbow. Not striking it, just guiding it. The way you'd guide a door that was already swinging on its hinge. Mara's own lift, her own committed power, carried both of them down to the mat together. She landed on top. It looked, for half a breath, like a victory. It wasn't. By the time her shoulder hit the mat, Bruce Lee's arm was already where it needed to be, looped beneath hers, his legs already finding the angle that strength alone cannot answer, because strength was never the question being asked. Mara felt the pressure arrive not as pain but as inevitability. The unmistakable sensation of a door closing on a hinge she hadn't noticed was there. She fought it, Of course she fought it. 12 years of never tapping doesn't disappear in 11 minutes. Her legs drove, her shoulders strained. The mat groaned beneath both of them as 280 pounds tried to overpower a hold that had never once depended on outmuscling anything. But the harder she pulled, the deeper the lock seated itself. Not because Bruce Lee was stronger, but because her own force was doing the work for him. The way a fish exhausts itself fighting a hook that was never going to break. At 11 minutes and 4 seconds, Mara Voss tapped the mat twice with her free hand. The room didn't erupt. It didn't fall silent either. It simply sat in that strange, suspended quiet that follows something nobody quite has the vocabulary for yet. Bruce Lee released the hold instantly and helped her sit up before he even caught his own breath, his hand steady under her shoulder. "Your grip," he said quietly, "is the strongest I've ever felt on my wrist." Mara looked at him for a long moment, chest heaving, the disbelief on her face slower to arrive than the exhaustion. "Then how?" "You were never fighting my strength," Bruce Lee said. "You were fighting your own, the whole time. I only changed where it was pointed." She let out a short, disbelieving laugh, not bitter, just stunned, and extended her hand. He took it. "Sully never installed cameras in the warehouse, and to this day insists he never will. He says some things are better left as stories people argue about over drinks than footage people pause and rewind." Theo went on to open his own small school 2 towns over, teaching the old method to a new generation of students who'd never heard the legend secondhand, only thirdhand, which he privately suspected was exactly how his teacher would have wanted it. AJ eventually wrote her article, 6 months late, for 1,000 words long, and far more about the idea of strength than about the match itself, because by the time she sat down to write it, she'd realized the score wasn't really the point. The editor cut it down to 1/3 of its length and ran it as a weekend feature. She never forgave him for the cuts, and never stopped being glad she'd witnessed the thing the cuts couldn't capture anyway. Denny still trains with Mara every week, though he no longer claims to know, with any real certainty, what makes a person unbeatable, and he stopped pretending he does, which Mara considers the most significant change in him. As for Mara and Bruce Lee, they trained together on and off for the better part of a year afterward, an arrangement that struck almost everyone who heard about it as faintly absurd. The strong woman and the bicycle-riding fighter, splitting sessions between her gym's iron and his boathouse mats. She never stopped lifting. He never started. Neither saw the contradiction as one worth resolving. And Mara herself, when people ask about the smaller man who beat her in front of a crowd that mostly didn't believe what it saw, gives roughly the same answer every time, though the wording has softened with retelling. "He didn't beat my strength. He borrowed it. Spent 11 minutes proving I'd never actually needed all of it in the first place. Just the part one knew how to aim." Then she goes back to the gym and trains anyway, because some lessons, she's decided, are worth losing to more than once.